The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as Derek Callahan grabbed his wife's arm in front of 500 guests. "You're worthless," he spat, loud enough for the cameras to catch every syllable. "A nobody. And I want a divorce." His mistress smiled beside him, victorious. But Derek made one fatal mistake. He didn't know the quiet woman he'd just humiliated wasn't a poor orphan from Maine. She was the only daughter of the richest man on the eastern seaboard, and her father had just walked through the ballroom doors. Comment below which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Margaret Thornton stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her hands trembling as she tried to fasten the zipper of her dress. It was navy blue, simple, elegant in its own quiet way, but nothing like the custom gowns the other wives would be wearing tonight. She'd bought it at Nordstrom Rack 3 weeks ago, paying with cash she'd saved from the grocery budget because Derek had cut her credit cards again. "You spend too much," he'd told her last month, not even looking up from his phone. "Learn to live within your means." Within her means. As if she hadn't once written a check for $12 million without blinking. As if she hadn't funded his entire empire from the shadows, while he paraded around Boston, calling himself a self-made man. 7 years. She'd given him 7 years to prove he loved her for who she was, not what she could give him. And tonight, she would finally have her answer. The bedroom door slammed open. "Margaret!" Derek's voice cut through the air like a blade. She turned, her heart already sinking into her stomach. He stood in the doorway, adjusting the cufflinks on his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He was handsome. God help her, he was still handsome. That sharp jawline, those piercing blue eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. Now those eyes looked at her like she was a stain on his carpet. "You're not ready." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I just need 5 more minutes. The zipper is—" "I don't have 5 minutes." He checked his Patek Philippe, the watch she'd secretly bought him for their first anniversary through one of her shell companies. He thought he'd earned it. He thought he'd earned everything. "Victoria is waiting in the car. We have to go over the press strategy before the gala." Victoria. The name hit her like a physical blow, even after all these months. Victoria Lane, his VP of operations, his mistress, the woman who had slowly, methodically erased Margaret from Derek's life. Not through force, but through whispers, through late nights at the office, through business dinners that lasted until 2 in the morning. Margaret had found the hotel receipts 6 months ago. She hadn't said a word. "I thought we could ride together," Margaret said quietly. "It's the company's 75th anniversary. The press will be there. It looks strange if the CEO arrives with his assistant instead of his wife." Derek crossed the room in 3 long strides. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up at him. His cologne filled her senses. Expensive. Suffocating. "Let me make something crystal clear, Margaret." His voice was low, dangerous. "You are my wife on paper. Victoria is the one who helps me build this empire. You just exist in it. Don't make me regret letting you come tonight." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. "Take the car service. Fix your hair. You look like a librarian." The door slammed behind him. Margaret stood alone in the silence of the Beacon Hill townhouse. 22 rooms, 6 fireplaces. A wine cellar worth more than most people's homes. And she had never felt more like a prisoner. She looked at her reflection again. Derek saw a librarian. He saw a nobody. He saw the poor orphan from Maine he'd rescued from obscurity and elevated to the heights of Boston society. He didn't see the truth. Margaret walked to her closet, past the modest dresses Derek approved of, past the sensible shoes he preferred. to the very back, where a false panel hid a small safe she'd installed 3 years ago when she first started to suspect. She punched in the code, her mother's birthday, the mother she'd lost at 16, the mother who had taught her that real queens don't wear crowns, they wear patience. The safe clicked open. Inside lay a velvet box. She opened it with reverent fingers. The ring inside wasn't a diamond. It was heavy, intricate, bearing a crest that hadn't been seen in public for nearly a decade. A golden eagle clutching an olive branch. The seal of the Ashworth family. Margaret Thornton wasn't Margaret Thornton. She was Margaret Rose Ashworth, the only daughter of William Ashworth, founder and chairman of Ashworth Global Holdings, a shipping and logistics empire worth $47 billion. A man Forbes called the Shark of the Eastern Seaboard. A man who had once made a senator cry in a congressional hearing. A man who had found his runaway daughter 3 days ago. And he was coming to the gala tonight. Margaret slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling its weight like an old friend. She hadn't worn it in 7 years. Not since the night she'd run away from her father's estate in Greenwich, desperate to find someone who would love her for herself, not her inheritance. She'd met Derek at a coffee shop in Cambridge. He was a struggling entrepreneur with a brilliant idea and empty pockets. She was a woman in a cheap sundress, pretending to be a graduate student. He'd bought her a latte. He'd made her laugh. He'd looked at her like she mattered. Within 6 months, she'd secretly funneled $5 million into his failing company through Polaris Ventures, a shell investment firm she'd created specifically to hide her involvement. The money came from her personal trust, the inheritance her mother had left her, separate from her father's empire. Derek never knew. He thought Polaris was a group of angel investors who believed in his genius. He thought he was self-made. He thought she was lucky to have him. Margaret closed the velvet box, but kept the ring on her finger. She covered it with her other hand, hiding it from view. Tonight was the test. Her father had given her an ultimatum when he'd shown up at a cafe 3 days ago, surrounded by security, looking older than she remembered, but no less formidable. "Come home, Margaret. Take your place. Or stay with this man who is destroying you." "He's my husband, Father." "He's a parasite feeding on a host he doesn't even know exists." William Ashworth had leaned across the table, his gray eyes boring into hers. "I've watched you for 7 years, sweetheart. I've seen every time he's made you cry. Every time he's chosen that woman over you. Every time he's called you worthless when you're worth more than his entire bloodline combined." "You've been watching me?" "I never stopped watching you. You're my daughter, my only child. Did you think I would let you disappear without knowing you were safe?" Margaret had felt tears threatening. "I wanted to be loved for me, Father, not for the money, not for the name." "And has he loved you? Has he proven himself worthy of the gift you've given him?" She couldn't answer. The silence said everything. "I'll be at the gala," William had said, standing. "The Callahan Company uses our shipping routes. He doesn't know it, but half his supply chain runs through Ashworth vessels. I have every right to attend." "Father." "I won't interfere unless you want me to, Margaret, but I will be there. And when you're ready to come home, I will be waiting." Now, standing in her bedroom, Margaret looked at the ring on her finger one last time. "Tonight," she whispered to her reflection, "tonight we see who you really are, Derek Callahan." The Four Seasons Ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over Boston's elite. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes that cost more per bite than some people's hourly wages. Margaret arrived alone. She walked through the entrance with her head down, trying to make herself invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over 7 years. How to take up less space. How to fade into the background. How to become a ghost in her own life. As she navigated the crowd, she heard the whispers. "Is that the wife? Poor thing. Have you seen who he's with? The blonde in the red dress, Victoria something. Everyone knows they're sleeping together. Why does she stay? Money, probably. Where else would she go?" Margaret's fingers tightened around her clutch. Inside it, the velvet box pressed against her palm like a heartbeat. She spotted them near the center of the room. Derek was holding court, a glass of scotch in one hand, laughing at something a state senator was saying. He looked magnificent, powerful, every inch the king of Boston's business world. And clinging to his arm, wearing a scarlet Valentino gown that left nothing to the imagination, was Victoria Lane. Victoria was beautiful in the way that weapons are beautiful. Sharp, dangerous, designed to destroy. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves. Her smile showed too many teeth. She saw Margaret before Derek did. Victoria leaned in, whispering something in Derek's ear. His smile vanished. He sighed heavily, the way someone sighs when they see a stray dog that won't stop following them. He motioned for Margaret to come over. Like a pet being called to heel. Margaret walked toward them. The circle of elites parted to let her through. She saw their faces. Pity, amusement, contempt. The poor, pathetic wife who didn't know her place. They had no idea who they were looking at.
"Margaret,"
Victoria's voice dripped with sweetness.
"you made it, and look at that dress.
She reached out and touched the fabric.
So practical.
Did you find it at Macy's? It's charming, in a vintage sort of way." Laughter rippled through the group. Derek didn't defend her. He took a long sip of his scotch. "She has simple tastes," he said. "Not everyone can pull off haute couture like you, Victoria." "It's Nordstrom, actually," Margaret said quietly.
And it's blue. Your favorite color, Derek.
"My favorite color is success, Margaret," he smirked. "Something you wouldn't understand." He turned his back on her, addressing the senator. "As I was saying, Jim, Callahan Maritime is looking to expand into European shipping routes. We're eyeing some partnerships with Ashworth Global." Margaret froze. The senator laughed nervously. "Good luck with that. William Ashworth doesn't do partnerships. He does acquisitions. They say he's the most ruthless negotiator on the eastern seaboard." I can handle William Ashworth. Derek's arrogance was a living thing, filling the space around him. "Everyone has a price. I'll find his." Margaret spoke before she could stop herself. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You can't buy respect, Derek. And William Ashworth doesn't have a price. He has principles." The group went silent. Derek turned slowly. His eyes narrowed. The temperature in their little circle dropped 20 degrees. "Excuse me?" His voice was dangerously soft. "Since when do you have opinions about business strategy? Go find a waiter and get me another scotch. You're boring the guests with your presence." "I'm your wife, not your waitress." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. It was the first time in 3 years she had publicly contradicted him. Victoria laughed, that high, tinkling sound that made Margaret's skin crawl. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. He's just stressed about the gala." She reached out and patted Margaret's cheek, slowly, condescendingly, like she was soothing a child throwing a tantrum. "Go on, be a good girl." That touch, that patronizing, dismissive touch. Something inside Margaret snapped. 7 years of silence. 7 years of swallowing her pride. 7 years of being treated like furniture in her own home. 7 years of watching her husband fall in love with another woman while she funded his empire from the shadows. Enough. Margaret grabbed Victoria's wrist and shoved her hand away. The sound echoed through the nearby crowd. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The string quartet seemed to quiet. Don't. Margaret's voice dropped an octave, losing its tremor. Touch me. Again. Victoria's eyes went wide. She'd never seen this Margaret before. Neither had Derek. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe even a hint of fear. But it vanished quickly, replaced by rage. He needed to regain control. He needed to remind everyone who held the power here. He slammed his scotch glass onto a passing waiter's tray. The glass shattered. Amber liquid and crystal shards exploded across the marble floor. That is enough. His voice boomed across the ballroom. Hundreds of conversations died. Every eye turned toward them. You ungrateful, embarrassing woman. He grabbed Margaret's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh, hard enough to leave bruises. I have tolerated you for 7 years. I gave you a home. I gave you a name. I gave you a life you could never have earned on your own. And this is how you repay me? By making a scene at my gala? By embarrassing me in front of my colleagues? I gave you everything, Margaret shot back, wrenching her arm free. The strength in her voice surprised even her. I gave you my heart. I supported you when you were nothing. You gave me nothing but dead weight, Derek laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. He looked around at the crowd watching them. Perfect. They were all watching. Time to put on a show. You want to know the truth, Margaret? I'm done. I was going to wait until after the holidays to tell you. But why wait? Why drag out the inevitable? He straightened his jacket, smoothing his tie, performing for the cameras he knew were recording. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room. I apologize for the interruption. My wife has always been fragile. But since we're all here, I might as well make it official. He turned to Margaret, smiling like a shark about to bite. I want a divorce. Gasps rippled through the ballroom like waves. Victoria covered her mouth, but Margaret could see the smile underneath her manicured fingers. I'm filing on Monday, Derek continued, enjoying every moment. And don't even think about asking for alimony, Margaret. You signed a prenup. You leave with exactly what you came with. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent room. Which is nothing. You are nothing, Margaret. You always were nothing, and without me, you'll go back to being nothing. Margaret stood perfectly still. The words washed over her. Worthless. Nothing. Nobody. She had heard them so many times, in private, behind closed doors, whispered after too many drinks, screamed during arguments she always lost because she never fought back. But this time, something was different. This time, the words didn't break her. They freed her. She looked at Derek, really looked at him, past the handsome face and the expensive suit and the confident smile. And she saw him for what he truly was. A small man. A scared man. A man who had built his entire identity on a lie. A man who had just made the worst mistake of his life. A nobody, Margaret repeated softly. Her voice was calm, eerily calm. That's what I said. Derek crossed his arms, triumphant. Now get out of my sight before I have security escort you out. I have important guests to attend to. Margaret reached into her clutch. Derek flinched, expecting her to pull out a tissue, to wipe her tears.
to slink away in shame like she always did. Instead, she pulled out the velvet box. "I'll leave, Derek." Her voice rang clear across the silent ballroom. "But first, there's someone who would like to have a word with you about that European expansion you mentioned." "What are you talking about?" Derek snapped. "What's in that box? Did you steal something from my safe?" "Not from yours." Margaret opened the box. The signet ring gleamed under the chandelier light. Gold eagle, olive branch, the crest that appeared on cargo ships and corporate letterheads across the globe. "From mine." Before Derek could respond, the heavy double doors at the main entrance exploded inward. The room fell deathly silent.
12 men in dark suits marched in, moving with military precision. They wore earpieces and gold lapel pins bearing the same eagle crest as Margaret's ring. They fanned out, flanking the entrance like soldiers preparing for a general. Then a man stepped through. He was in his mid-60s, with silver hair and a trimmed beard that commanded authority. He wore a tuxedo, but across his chest was a sash of midnight blue silk, and on his lapel sat more gold than most people would see in a lifetime. He carried a cane topped with a golden eagle's head, but it was clear he didn't need it for walking. It was a statement. Margaret heard the senator behind her make a strangled sound. "My God," the man whispered. "That's William Ashworth." The name rippled through the crowd like wildfire. William Ashworth, the shark of the eastern seaboard. The man who had destroyed 3 Fortune 500 companies before breakfast and donated $1 billion to children's hospitals before lunch. The man whose shipping empire touched every port on the Atlantic coast. The man who never, ever made public appearances. Until tonight. Derek's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and naked greed in the span of 3 seconds. His survival instinct warred with his ambition, and ambition won. This was it. This was his chance. William Ashworth was here, at his gala. Fate was finally rewarding him for his genius. He pushed Victoria aside and strode forward, plastering on his most charming smile. "Mr. Ashworth," Derek's voice boomed with false warmth. "What an incredible honor! I'm Derek Callahan, CEO of Callahan Maritime. I had no idea you were attending tonight. Please, let me get you a drink. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership between our companies." William Ashworth didn't even glance at him. His steel-gray eyes scanned the ballroom, passing over the billionaires and the politicians and the society wives, searching for something. Someone. His gaze landed on the woman standing alone in the center of the circle, clutching a velvet box, wearing a simple navy dress and a ring that hadn't been seen in public for 7 years. William walked forward. His security detail parted the crowd before him like Moses parting the Red Sea. He walked right past Derek Callahan as if he were a potted plant. Derek's smile faltered. "Mr. Ashworth, sir, I'm right here. I'm the host of this." William stopped in front of Margaret. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the most powerful man on the eastern seaboard dropped his cane. It clattered against the marble floor, echoing in the absolute silence. He opened his arms. "Margaret," his voice cracked. The shark of the eastern seaboard, the man who had made grown men weep in boardrooms, sounded like he was about to cry. "My little girl, it's been too long." Margaret felt 7 years of walls crumbling inside her. She stepped forward and fell into her father's embrace. Derek's face went white, then gray, then a shade of pale that suggested his heart might have actually stopped. "Daughter?" The word came out as a croak. "Did you say, daughter?" William pulled back from the embrace. He looked at his daughter's face, at the fading bruise on her arm where Derek had grabbed her, at the tears streaming down her cheeks. Then he turned to face Derek Callahan. "You have been saying some very interesting things tonight, Mr. Callahan." William's voice was soft, controlled, terrifying. "I heard you from outside. These old walls don't block sound as well as they should." I didn't..." Derek stumbled backward. "Sir, I had no idea. Margaret never told me. She lied to me. If I had known she was..." "If you had known," Margaret interrupted, her voice steady now, "you would have treated me like a trophy instead of a person. You would have loved my name instead of me." She stepped out of her father's embrace. She slid the signet ring fully onto her finger, letting the light catch the golden eagle. "I wanted to be loved for who I was, Derek. I gave you 7 years to prove you were a good man. 7 years to prove that the love I saw in the beginning was real." She looked him dead in the eye. "You failed." "Margaret, baby, please." Derek dropped to his knees. Right there, in front of 500 of Boston's elite, in front of the security cameras, in front of the smartphones already recording. "I was stressed. The company, the pressure. Victoria means nothing to me. You're my wife. We can fix this. Think about what we could do together. Callahan Maritime and Ashworth Global. We would be unstoppable." "You still don't understand, do you?" Margaret shook her head slowly. "You're not thinking about me. You're thinking about the money, the power. Even now, on your knees, you're calculating how to use me." She turned to her father. "Papa, I'm ready to hear about Polaris." Derek's head snapped up. "Polaris? What does Polaris Ventures have to do with anything?" William Ashworth smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Polaris Ventures, Mr. Callahan, is the investment firm that saved your company from bankruptcy 7 years ago. The firm that gave you $5 million when no bank in the country would touch you. The firm that has been your silent majority shareholder ever since." Derek's face went from gray to green. "That's impossible. Polaris is a group of angel investors. They reached out to me because they believed in my vision." "Polaris Ventures," William continued, "is a shell company created and solely owned by my daughter. The $5 million came from her personal trust, the trust her mother left her before she died." The murmurs in the crowd reached a fever pitch. "Every dollar you have," Margaret said quietly, "came from me. Every expansion, every acquisition, every bonus you gave yourself. I paid for it. I believed in you, Derek. When you were nothing, I made you something." She took a breath. "And you spent 7 years proving you didn't deserve it." "No!" Derek was shaking now, sweat pouring down his face. "No, no, no! This can't be happening. You're lying. You're both lying. Polaris can't belong to her. I had lawyers look into it. They never found..." "They found exactly what we wanted them to find," William said. "Shell companies within shell companies, Mr. Callahan. You're a businessman. Surely you understand the concept of protecting assets from predators." He gestured to his security team. 2 men stepped forward, flanking Derek. "As of this morning, Polaris Ventures has invoked the character clause in your original lending agreement. A clause you signed without reading because you were too arrogant to hire a competent lawyer. A clause that states, if the primary borrower engages in gross public misconduct, causing reputational damage to the fund, all debts become immediately due, and ownership of collateralized assets transfers to the primary investor." Derek's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "In simpler terms," William said, leaning on his cane, "my daughter now owns 51% of your company. Your board of directors will be receiving a formal notification within the hour. And I suspect, given tonight's entertainment, they will be quite eager to discuss new leadership." "You can't do this." Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "You can't take my company. I built it. I built it with my own hands."
You built it with her money, William corrected. You built it with her heart, and you broke them both. He offered his arm to Margaret. Come, sweetheart, the jet is waiting. You've spent 7 years in the cold. It's time to come home. Margaret took her father's arm, but before she walked away, she turned back to Derek one last time. You called me worthless, Derek. You called me a nobody. You said I came into this marriage with nothing. She held up her hand, the signet ring gleaming. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Margaret Rose Ashworth, sole heir to the Ashworth Global Holdings empire. And you? She leaned in close enough to whisper, You have just declared war on the wrong family. Margaret and her father walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before them like water. Security flanked them on all sides. The heavy doors swung open, and Margaret Ashworth walked out of her old life without looking back. Behind her, Derek Callahan remained on his knees, surrounded by the ruins of everything he thought he had built, watching his wife disappear into the night. Victoria approached him hesitantly. Derek? Derek, what do we do? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, Derek Callahan had nothing to say. The ballroom erupted the moment the doors closed behind Margaret and her father. 500 smartphones captured everything. 500 voices exploded into chaos. And Derek Callahan remained frozen on his knees, staring at the space where his wife had stood. Victoria grabbed his arm. Derek, get up. Everyone is watching. He didn't move. Derek! She shook him harder. You need to say something. You need to fix this. Senator Jim Morrison stepped back from the circle, already typing furiously on his phone. His aide leaned in, whispering something about damage control and press statements. The string quartet had stopped playing. Even the waiters stood frozen, trays suspended in midair. Derek finally blinked. He looked down at his hands, then up at the crowd surrounding him. Hundreds of faces, some shocked, some amused, some already recording videos that would destroy him by morning. This is a misunderstanding, he said, his voice cracking. He struggled to his feet, brushing off his tuxedo. Margaret is clearly... she's unwell. She's been under a lot of stress lately. I had no idea her delusions had gotten this severe. Delusions? A woman's voice cut through the murmurs. It was Eleanor Whitfield, the society columnist for the Boston Globe. She pushed through the crowd, her phone held high. Mr. Callahan, are you suggesting that William Ashworth is also delusional? Because that was definitely William Ashworth who just walked out of here with his arm around your wife. That man could have been anyone. An actor. Someone Margaret hired to... I've interviewed William Ashworth twice, Eleanor interrupted. Trust me, Mr. Callahan. That was him. So either your wife is the secret daughter of a billionaire, or William Ashworth has started doing dinner theater. Which story would you like me to run with? Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Victoria stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Margaret has always been somewhat dramatic. She probably... And you must be Victoria Lane. Eleanor's smile sharpened. The VP of Operations who arrived on the CEO's arm while his wife took a car service. Would you like to comment on your relationship with Mr. Callahan for the record? Victoria's face went pale. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Mrs. Lane. I'm asking a direct question. Are you sleeping with your boss? The crowd pressed closer, hungry for blood. Derek grabbed Victoria's hand. We're leaving. This interview is over. The interview hasn't started yet, Mr. Callahan. Eleanor blocked their path. But I'm sure my readers would love to hear how a self-made billionaire reacted when he discovered his wife secretly funded his entire company. That is what happened, isn't it? Polaris Ventures belongs to Margaret Ashworth.
which means every dollar in your pocket came from the woman you just called worthless. Derek shoved past her, dragging Victoria toward the service exit. The crowd parted reluctantly, phones still recording, voices still buzzing. "Mr. Callahan, one more question." He didn't look back. The service corridor was cold and empty. Derek's footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as he pulled Victoria toward the parking garage. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "This cannot be happening." "Derek, slow down. You're hurting my arm." He didn't slow down. His mind was racing, calculating, trying to find an angle. There had to be an angle. There was always an angle. "It's a bluff," he said suddenly. "It has to be a bluff. Margaret doesn't have that kind of money. She can't. She came to me with nothing. She was wearing a sundress from Target when we met. She didn't even have a credit card." "Derek, that was William Ashworth. I saw his picture in Forbes last month." It was definitely him. So what if it was? Maybe he's her godfather. Maybe he's some distant relative she looked up. That doesn't mean she owns Polaris. That doesn't mean any of what they said is true. They reached his car, a black Mercedes S-Class, parked in the VIP section. Derek fumbled for his keys, his hand shaking so badly he dropped them twice. Victoria picked them up. "Let me drive. I can drive my own damn car." "Derek," she grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "You're spiraling. We need to think clearly. If even half of what they said is true, it's not true." "If it is," she pressed, "we need a plan. We need lawyers. We need to get ahead of this before the morning news cycle." Derek took a breath, then another. The panic in his chest slowly transformed into something harder, colder. "You're right," he said. "Call Robert Chen. Tell him I need an emergency meeting tonight. And get me everything you can find on Polaris Ventures. Incorporation documents, board members, anything. It's almost midnight. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. Call him." Victoria nodded, already pulling out her phone as she slid into the driver's seat. Derek got in beside her, his jaw clenched tight. Margaret thought she could destroy him with a dramatic exit and a fancy ring. She thought she could waltz in with her billionaire daddy and take everything he had built. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Derek Callahan didn't lose. Ever. He would find a way out of this. He would find the lie in her story. And when he did, he would make her regret the day she ever tried to humiliate him. The Mercedes roared out of the parking garage. Neither of them noticed the black SUV that pulled out behind them, keeping a careful distance. William Ashworth's security team had been given very specific instructions. Watch everything. Report everything. And when the time came, destroy everything. The private jet lifted off from Logan Airport at 1:47 a.m. Margaret sat in a leather seat that cost more than Derek's car, staring out the window at the lights of Boston shrinking below. Her father sat across from her, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching her with eyes that missed nothing. "You're quiet," William said. "I'm processing." "Processing what? Your freedom? Your victory?" The look on that man's face when he realized he had been living off your charity for 7 years. Margaret almost smiled. Almost. "I'm processing 7 years of believing I was worthless. 7 years of thinking I wasn't enough. You don't just turn that off, Papa, even when you know it was a lie." William set down his glass. He leaned forward, taking his daughter's hands in his. "I wanted to come sooner," he said quietly. "Every time my people reported back, every time they told me he had made you cry, I wanted to burn his world to the ground. But you asked me for space. You asked me to let you live your own life. So I watched. And I waited. and I prayed you would see him for what he was before it was too late. Why didn't you just tell me? Send me the evidence. Would you have believed it? Or would you have thought I was trying to manipulate you into coming home?" Margaret didn't answer. They both knew the truth. "You had to see it yourself," William continued. "You had to hear him say those words with his own mouth, in front of witnesses. Otherwise, you would have made excuses. You would have given him another chance, and another, until there was nothing left of the girl I raised." A tear slid down Margaret's cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "He didn't know," she whispered, "about the baby." William's grip on her hands tightened. "What?" "I'm pregnant, Papa. 12 weeks. I was going to tell him last night, before the gala. I had the sonogram in an envelope. I thought maybe if he knew, if he realized we were going to be a family, something would change." William's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, joy, fury, and finally, a cold, terrible resolve. "Does he know now?" "No, I couldn't give him that. Not after what he said. Not after how he treated me." "Good." William's voice was hard as granite. "He doesn't deserve to know. He doesn't deserve to be within 1,000 miles of my grandchild." "He's still the father, Papa." "He is a sperm donor who happened to be married to you. That does not make him a father. A father protects. A father provides. A father would never, ever call the mother of his child worthless in front of 500 people." Margaret pulled her hands away. She turned back to the window, watching the clouds roll beneath them. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home. You rest, you heal, and my lawyers handle the rest. The company will belong to you by the end of the week. The board will vote him out the moment they see the documentation. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator, and right now, associating with Derek Callahan is corporate suicide." "And Derek himself?" William's smile was a blade in the darkness. "Derek Callahan is about to learn a very important lesson, sweetheart. One his parents apparently failed to teach him." "What lesson?" "That when you declare war on an Ashworth, you don't just lose the battle." He picked up his scotch, taking a slow sip. "You lose everything." 6 hours later, the sun rose over Boston. Derek hadn't slept. He sat in his home office, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups, his eyes red and burning. Robert Chen, his corporate lawyer, sat across from him, looking like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. "Say that again," Derek demanded. Robert rubbed his temples. "I've said it 3 times, Derek. The documentation is legitimate. Polaris Ventures was incorporated in Delaware 7 years ago. The sole owner is a trust called the Aurora Foundation. The Aurora Foundation is controlled by Margaret Rose Ashworth, your wife. Ex-wife." "Not yet. You announced you wanted a divorce. You haven't filed anything, which means, legally, she's still your wife. And legally, she has owned 51% of your company for the past 7 years." Derek slammed his fist on the desk. "How is that possible? I had lawyers vet Polaris before I took their money. They said it was a consortium of angel investors." "They said that because that's what Polaris wanted them to think. The shell company structure is impressive. Layers within layers. It would have taken a forensic accounting team months to trace it back to the source. And frankly, you didn't ask them to. You were too desperate for the money." "I wasn't desperate. I was strategic." Robert gave him a look that said they both knew that was a lie. "The point is, the character clause in your original agreement is ironclad. Public misconduct causing reputational damage to the fund. Last night's performance certainly qualifies. Polaris has every legal right to call in their debt and convert it to equity, which they did. at 6 a.m. this morning. What? Robert slid a document across the desk. This was filed with the SEC an hour ago. Polaris Ventures has exercised its conversion rights. You no longer hold a controlling interest in Callahan Maritime. Margaret Ashworth does. Derek stared at the paper. The words blurred in front of his eyes. I'll fight it. I'll sue. Sue who? Your wife? For giving you money? A jury is going to love that, Derek. The billionaire CEO suing the woman he publicly humiliated for secretly funding his success. You'll be laughed out of court. Then I'll claim fraud. She misrepresented herself. She didn't misrepresent anything. She never told you she was poor. You assumed. And even if you could prove fraud, which you can't, it wouldn't matter. The character clause exists independently. Your misconduct triggered it. The conversion is legal. Victoria burst through the office door. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Derek, turn on the TV, now. I don't have time for turn it on. Derek grabbed the remote and clicked on the wall-mounted screen. CNN was running a breaking news banner. The anchor's voice filled the room. Footage from last night's Callahan Maritime Gala has gone viral, with over 80 million views and counting. The video shows CEO Derek Callahan publicly berating his wife, calling her worthless and a nobody, before demanding a divorce in front of hundreds of guests. What Callahan didn't know was that his wife, Margaret Thornton, is actually Margaret Ashworth, the sole heir to the $47 billion Ashworth Global Holdings empire. The screen cut to the video. Derek watched himself grab Margaret's arm, watched himself sneer at her, watched himself announce the divorce like it was a victory. Then he watched William Ashworth walk through those doors, watch the most powerful man on the eastern seaboard embrace his daughter. Watched himself fall to his knees. Turn it off, Derek whispered. It gets worse, Victoria said. Look at the comments. She held up her phone. Derek grabbed it. The hashtag #worthlesswife was trending #1 worldwide. The comments were merciless. He called her worthless when she literally paid for his suits, LMAO. This man built his whole empire on her money and then cheated on her. I cannot. Imagine having everything and still being this stupid. Team Margaret, burn him to the ground. Derek threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. This is her fault, he snarled. She planned this. She set me up. She wanted me to humiliate myself so she could swoop in with her daddy and steal everything I built. Robert stood up, gathering his papers. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. For the record, Derek, I've been your lawyer for 9 years. I've covered up a lot of things for you. But this is beyond covering up. You need a crisis management team. You need a PR firm. And you need to seriously consider stepping down before the board removes you. I'm not stepping down from my own company. It's not your company anymore. Read the documents. Robert walked out without another word. Victoria moved toward Derek, reaching for his arm. Baby, we can figure this out. Maybe if you apologized publicly. If you did an interview, explained that you were under stress. Apologize? Derek laughed bitterly. To who? To Margaret? To the world? I'm not apologizing for anything. I didn't do anything wrong. Derek, you called your wife worthless on camera. You announced your divorce in front of... She deserved it, his voice cracked. She lied to me for 7 years. She let me think I built this myself when she was pulling the strings the whole time. I'm the victim here, Victoria. I'm the one who was manipulated. Victoria stared at him. Something shifted in her eyes. Something that looked almost like clarity. Derek, she said slowly,
You cheated on her. For 3 years. You cut her credit cards. You made her beg for grocery money. You humiliated her in private 100 times before you did it in public. And now you're saying she deserved it because she secretly gave you $5 million? Whose side are you on? I'm on my side, Derek. I've always been on my side. She picked up her purse. And right now, my side is about to be very far away from yours. What the hell does that mean? It means TMZ offered me $200,000 for an exclusive interview. I'm taking it. Derek grabbed her wrist.
You wouldn't dare. Watch me. She yanked her arm free. You promised me the world, Derek. You said when you divorced Margaret, we would be together. You said I would be the next Mrs. Callahan. But there's nothing left, is there? No company, no money, no power. Just a man who's about to be the most hated person in America. She walked to the door. Victoria, wait. We can work this out. She paused, her hand on the doorframe. She looked back at him with something between pity and contempt. You know what's funny, Derek? I never loved you. I loved what you represented. Money, status, power. And now that all of that is gone, I realize I don't even like you. You're cruel. You're selfish. And you're so convinced of your own genius that you couldn't see you were married to the only person who ever truly believed in you. She smiled coldly. Good luck, Derek. You're going to need it. The door closed behind her. Derek stood alone in his office, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he thought he had. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Callahan, this is the Four Seasons Boston. Please be advised that your corporate account has been frozen pending review. Your reservation for the annual suite has been canceled. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Another buzz. His building manager. Mr. Callahan, we've been informed that the penthouse unit is owned by Polaris Ventures LLC. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Another buzz. His personal banker. Mr. Callahan, your accounts have been flagged for review by our compliance department. All cards have been temporarily suspended. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Derek's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, staring at his phone as message after message rolled in. Cancellations, suspensions, rejections. Walls closing in from every direction. She hadn't just humiliated him, she was erasing him. The board meeting lasted exactly 11 minutes. Derek arrived at Callahan Maritime headquarters at 9 a.m., wearing his best suit, his hair carefully combed, his smile firmly in place. He was going to fight. He was going to remind these people who built this company, who made them all rich, who turned a struggling startup into a shipping empire. The security guard in the lobby didn't recognize him. I'm sorry, sir. I'll need to see some ID. You know who I am, Frank. I'm Derek Callahan. I sign your paychecks. Frank's face remained impassive. I'll need to see some ID, sir. Derek fumbled for his wallet, slapping his driver's license on the security desk. Frank examined it carefully, made a phone call, and finally handed him a visitor's badge. A visitor's badge. In his own building. The board is in conference room A, Frank said. Someone will escort you up. Derek's smile was starting to crack. The conference room felt different. The 12 people around the table, people he had hired, promoted, and enriched, looked at him like he was a stranger, like he was a problem to be solved. Marcus Thompson, the chairman of the board, sat at the head of the table. He didn't offer Derek a seat. Derek, thank you for coming. Marcus, before we begin, I want to assure everyone that last night was a misunderstanding. Margaret has clearly been suffering from some kind of breakdown. The claims about Polaris Ventures are completely accurate. A woman's voice interrupted him. Derek turned. A woman he didn't recognize stepped through a side door. She was sharp, immaculate, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his car. She carried a leather briefcase embossed with the Ashworth family crest. "Who the hell are you?" "I am Catherine Wells, Chief Legal Counsel for Ashworth Global Holdings." She set the briefcase on the table. "I am here to represent the interests of the majority shareholder, Margaret Rose Ashworth." Margaret doesn't have a lawyer. She can barely dress herself without— "Mr. Callahan," Catherine's voice cut through his protest like a scalpel, "I would advise you to be very careful about what you say next. Everything in this room is being recorded. Anything you say can and will be used in the upcoming legal proceedings." "What legal proceedings?" Catherine opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick stack of documents. "First, a restraining order. You're to come within no less than 500 feet of Margaret Ashworth or any member of the Ashworth family. Second, a notice of asset seizure. All property held in your name that was purchased with funds from Polaris Ventures, which is to say, all property in your name, is being frozen pending a full forensic audit." She slid another document across the table. "Third, and most relevantly for this meeting, a formal request from the majority shareholder for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO." The board members exchanged glances. "This is ridiculous," Derek sputtered. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I can," Catherine said calmly, "because I represent the person who owns 51% of this company. The person you called worthless last night. The person who funded every desk in this building, every ship in your fleet, every dollar in your pocket." She turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret Ashworth has authorized me to make the following offer. If you vote to remove Derek Callahan as CEO effective immediately, Ashworth Global will stabilize the stock price, restore the supply chain relationships that are currently being terminated, and provide each board member with a 20% increase in their annual compensation." Silence. Marcus Thompson cleared his throat. "And if we don't vote to remove him?" "Then Ashworth Global will liquidate its position in Callahan Maritime at whatever price the market will bear. Given the current media firestorm, I estimate that will be approximately 15 cents on the dollar. Your shares will be worthless by Friday." Derek looked around the table. 11 faces stared back at him. 11 people he had worked with for years. 11 people who owed their positions, their wealth, their careers to him. Not one of them would meet his eyes. "All in favor of removing Derek Callahan as CEO?" Marcus asked. 11 hands went up. Marcus raised his own hand. "Motion carried. Derek, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "You can't do this to me!" Derek lunged across the table, grabbing Marcus by the collar. "I built this company. I made all of you. You're nothing without me." 2 security guards grabbed him from behind, pulling him off Marcus. "Get your hands off me!" Derek thrashed wildly. "This is my company. My name is on the building." "Not anymore," Catherine said. She gestured to the guards. "Please escort Mr. Callahan off the premises and have someone call the sign company. The new owner wants her name on the building by Monday." They dragged him through the lobby, past the reception desk where his portrait used to hang, past the employees who used to grovel for his approval, past the glass doors that bore his name, out onto the sidewalk. They dropped him on the concrete like a bag of garbage. Derek scrambled to his feet, his suit torn, his hair wild. "You haven't heard the last of me," he screamed at the building. "I'll sue. I'll destroy all of you. I am Derek Callahan." The security guards walked back inside. The doors locked behind them. Derek stood on the street, panting, sweating, surrounded by tourists and business people who gave him a wide berth.
His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Margaret. I hope you understand now. This isn't revenge, Derek. This is justice. You had everything. A wife who loved you. A company that believed in you.
A future that could have been extraordinary. And you threw it all away because you couldn't see value in anything that didn't worship you. I want you to remember this feeling, this emptiness, this helplessness, because this is exactly how you made me feel every single day for 7 years. Goodbye, Derek. Don't contact me again. Derek stared at the message until his vision blurred with tears. Then he looked up at the building that used to be his. Workers were already on the roof, removing the letters of his name. The C was already gone. The last letter of his name hit the pavement with a dull thud. Derek watched from across the street as workers removed the final piece of the Callahan Maritime sign. 7 years of work, 7 years of sacrifice, 7 years of believing he was building something that would outlast him. Gone in 72 hours. His phone had stopped buzzing, not because the messages had stopped coming, but because his service had been disconnected. The corporate account that paid for everything, his phone, his car, his insurance, all of it had been severed the moment the board voted him out. He had $47 in his wallet, the cash he'd grabbed from his desk drawer before security dragged him out. $47 and the clothes on his back. Derek started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stand there and watch them erase him. His feet carried him to the Four Seasons. Muscle memory. He'd stayed in the penthouse suite every time Margaret's presence in the house became too suffocating. Every time he needed a night with Victoria without questions. The doorman blocked his path. I'm sorry, sir, I can't let you in. Thomas, it's me, Derek Callahan. I've been staying here for 3 years. I know who you are, Mr. Callahan. Thomas's face remained impassive. Management has asked me to inform you that you're no longer welcome on the premises. Your corporate account has been closed, and there's an outstanding balance of $47,000. $47,000? The minibar charges alone were quite substantial, sir. Derek's face burned. Behind him, he could hear tourists whispering. Phones were coming out. Someone recognized him. That's the guy from the video. The worthless wife guy? Oh my God, it is him. Derek turned and walked away as fast as he could without running. He needed to think. He needed a plan. He needed to find someone, anyone who would help him. His parents. They lived in Connecticut. His father had retired from a modest insurance business 5 years ago. They weren't wealthy, but they had a spare room. They would take him in while he figured out his next move. Derek found a payphone. He didn't even know payphones still existed, but there it was, on the corner of Boylston and Tremont. He fed quarters into the slot and dialed his childhood home. His mother answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Mom, it's Derek. Silence. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Her voice was cold, distant. Nothing like the warm woman who used to pack his lunches and cheer at his Little League games. What do you want, Derek? I'm in trouble, Mom. I need help. Can I come stay with you and Dad for a few days? Just until I get back on my feet? Another silence, longer this time. Your father and I saw the video, Derek. His stomach dropped. Mom, that was taken out of context. Margaret set me up. She planned the whole thing to... We saw you grab that woman's arm hard enough to leave bruises. We heard you call her worthless. We watched you humiliate her in front of hundreds of people. His mother's voice cracked. That's not how we raised you, Derek. That's not the son I thought I knew. Mom, please, I have nowhere else to go. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you destroyed your marriage. A pause. Your father says he doesn't want to speak to you. He says he's ashamed to share your name.
The words hit Derek like a physical blow. "Mom, don't call here again, Derek. Not until you've taken a long, hard look at the man you've become." Click. Derek stood there, the dead receiver pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. His own mother had hung up on him. His own father was ashamed of him. He replaced the receiver slowly and stepped back onto the sidewalk. The sun was setting. The temperature was dropping. He had $47, no phone, no car, no home, and no family. For the first time in his life, Derek Callahan was completely alone. Margaret's plane landed in Greenwich at sunset. The Ashworth estate sprawled across 200 acres of manicured perfection. It was the house Margaret had run away from 7 years ago, desperate to escape the expectations, the protocols, the gilded cage of being William Ashworth's only daughter. Now it felt like sanctuary. Her old room had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. The books on the shelves, the photos on the dresser, the childhood stuffed animals she'd been too embarrassed to take when she fled. Margaret sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing the navy dress from the gala. She hadn't changed. She hadn't slept. She had spent the entire flight staring out the window, replaying the moment Derek fell to his knees. She should feel triumphant. She should feel vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. A knock at the door. Her father entered without waiting for a response. "You should eat something," William said. "The kitchen staff made your favorite, chicken piccata." "I'm not hungry." "Margaret." He sat beside her on the bed. "You just ended a 7-year nightmare. You exposed a fraud. You reclaimed your birthright. Why do you look like you lost?" "Because I did lose, Papa." She looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed. "I lost 7 years of my life.
I lost the person I thought I married. I lost the dream of being loved for who I was, not what I could give." "That dream isn't dead, sweetheart. It's just waiting for someone worthy of it." "Is it?" Margaret laughed bitterly. "Because right now, all I feel is tired. Tired and stupid for believing so long." William was quiet for a moment. "When your mother was dying," he said slowly, "she made me promise something. She made me promise that I would let you make your own mistakes, that I wouldn't try to control your life the way my father tried to control mine." Margaret looked at him sharply. He rarely spoke about her mother. "She knew you would run someday. She knew the pressure of this life would drive you to seek something real. And she believed that whatever you found out there, good or bad, would teach you more than anything I could." "What did it teach me, Papa? That love is a lie? That people only want what you can give them?" "No." William took her hand. "It taught you how strong you are. It taught you that you can survive anything. And it taught you, finally, the difference between a man who deserves you and a man who doesn't." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She leaned into her father's shoulder, letting herself be held like a child. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I didn't tell you on the plane." William stiffened. "What is it?" Margaret pulled back. She reached into her clutch, which she'd been carrying since the gala, and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "I was going to give this to Derek last night, before everything happened, before I knew for certain what he was." She handed the envelope to her father. William opened it. He stared at the contents for a long moment. His face went through a series of emotions: confusion, realization, shock, and then something that looked almost like joy. "Margaret," he breathed, "is this—" 12 weeks. She placed a hand on her stomach. "I found out a month ago. I was waiting for the right moment to tell him. I thought maybe if he knew, if he realized we were going to be a family—" She couldn't finish the sentence. William looked at the sonogram, then at his daughter. His eyes were wet. "A grandchild,"
he said softly. Eleanor always wanted grandchildren. She used to talk about it constantly, how she would spoil them rotten, how she would teach them to ride horses and bake cookies and climb trees. I remember. She would have been so happy, Margaret, so incredibly happy. Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. Does he know? William asked, his voice hardening slightly. Derek, does he know about the baby? No, and I don't want him to know. Margaret. He threw me away, Papa. He called me worthless. He chose his mistress over his wife. What kind of father would he be? What kind of example would he set? He's still the biological father. He has legal rights. Not if I don't acknowledge paternity.
Not if the baby is born an Ashworth, not a Callahan. William studied her face. You've thought about this. I've thought about nothing else for the past 12 hours. Margaret stood, walking to the window. I will not let my child grow up wondering why their father didn't want them. I will not let Derek Callahan poison another generation with his selfishness. And if he finds out? If he fights for custody? Margaret turned. Her eyes were dry now, cold. Then we destroy him so completely that no court in the country would give him visitation rights to a houseplant, let alone a child. William smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Now you sound like an Ashworth. The next morning, Derek woke up on a park bench in Boston Common. His back ached. His suit was ruined. His mouth tasted like garbage, which made sense because he'd spent the night next to a garbage can. He sat up slowly, his head pounding. Around him, the city was waking up. Joggers passed without looking at him. Dog walkers steered their pets away. A homeless man on the next bench over gave him a sympathetic nod. Rough night? Derek stared at the man. He was older, maybe 60, with a graying beard and kind eyes. You could say that. First time sleeping outside? Derek nodded. It gets easier. The man stood, gathering his belongings into a shopping cart. Word of advice? Find a shelter before it gets cold. The one on Harrison Avenue has good food, and they don't ask too many questions. He shuffled away, pushing his cart. Derek watched him go. A week ago, he would have looked at that man with contempt. A failure. A loser. Someone who had made bad choices and deserved their fate. Now he was sitting on the same bench. Derek's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. He had $32 left after paying for the payphone and a bottle of water from a convenience store. He needed to find food. He needed to find shelter. He needed to figure out what the hell he was going to do with the rest of his life. His feet carried him toward downtown, toward the only person he could think of who might still help him. Victoria. She had betrayed him, yes. She had sold him out to TMZ. But they had been together for 3 years. They had shared secrets. They had made plans. Surely some part of her still cared. Her apartment was on Newberry Street, a luxury building he had helped her afford with bonuses and gifts and company credit cards. Derek pressed the buzzer. No answer. He pressed again, holding it down. Still nothing. She moved out, a voice said behind him. Derek turned. The building's doorman was watching him with suspicious eyes. What do you mean, moved out? Left yesterday. Said she was going to Los Angeles. Something about a book deal and a reality show. Derek's jaw dropped. A reality show? The network people were here all morning. Cameras, lights, the whole production. The doorman shrugged. She seemed pretty happy about it. Said she was going to tell her side of the story. Her side of the story. Of course. Victoria wasn't just running away. She was cashing in. She was turning his destruction into her career. Derek stumbled away from the building, his mind reeling. Everyone was profiting from his downfall. The media, the board, his ex-mistress.
Everyone except him. He walked for hours, past the shops where he used to spend thousands without thinking, past the restaurants where he used to entertain clients with $100 steaks, past the hotels where he used to conduct his affairs while Margaret waited at home, believing he was working late. The city that had once felt like his kingdom now felt like a prison. Everywhere he went, people stared. Some recognized him and whispered. Others just sensed something wrong, something broken, and gave him a wide berth. By nightfall, he found himself standing in front of his old building, the penthouse where he had lived for 5 years. The home Margaret had made for them. The home she had paid for. The doorman was different from the one he remembered. Younger, unfamiliar. "Can I help you, sir?" "I used to live here," Derek said. "Penthouse A. I wanted to see if I could get some of my things." The doorman checked a list. "Name?" "Derek Callahan." The young man's face changed. Recognition. And something else. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan. You're on the restricted list. I can't let you in the building." "The restricted list? This is my home." "It was your home, sir. The property now belongs to Polaris Ventures. They've given explicit instructions that you're not to be admitted under any circumstances." Derek's hands clenched into fists. "My clothes are up there. My personal belongings. My watch collection. I believe those items were boxed up and sent to a storage facility in Dorchester. You should have received a notice." "I didn't receive anything. I don't have a phone. I don't have an address." The doorman took a step back, his hand moving toward the security button. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't, I'll have to call the police." Derek stared at him. This kid couldn't be more than 25. A year ago, he would have been begging Derek for an autograph. Now he was threatening to have him arrested. "Fine." Derek's voice was hollow. "I'll go." He turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard the doorman pick up a phone. "Yeah, it's Tommy at the front desk. That guy showed up. Callahan. Yeah, he left. But you might want to let the new owners know. He seemed pretty unstable." Derek kept walking. Unstable. Is that what he was now? Is that what he'd become? He found an ATM and tried his debit card. Maybe, somehow, one account had been missed. One small reserve that could keep him alive. The screen flashed red. Card declined. Account frozen. Please contact your financial institution. Derek punched the machine. Once, twice, 3 times, until his knuckles were bleeding and an alarm was going off inside the bank. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He collapsed in an alley behind a restaurant, surrounded by dumpsters and the smell of rotting food. And for the first time since he was a child, Derek Callahan cried. Not tears of frustration or anger. Real tears. The kind that come from somewhere deep inside, from a place you didn't know existed until everything else has been stripped away. He cried for the company he had lost, for the life he had destroyed, for the wife he had thrown away. He cried for the man he thought he was and the monster he had become. And when the tears finally stopped, he was left with nothing but silence and the cold truth that he had done this to himself. Every choice, every cruelty, every moment he had chosen power over love. This was where it led. A week passed. Derek learned things about survival he had never imagined needing to know. He learned which shelters had the shortest lines and the cleanest beds. He learned which churches served hot meals on which days. He learned which street corners were claimed by which regulars, and what happened if you tried to take someone else's spot. He learned that the invisible people he had ignored his entire life had names and stories and struggles that made his own problems seem small. He learned that kindness could come from the most unexpected places, and cruelty from the people you trusted most. He found work at a warehouse in Worcester, loading boxes for $11 an hour. The manager didn't recognize him, didn't watch the news, just needed bodies who could lift 50 pounds and show up on time. Derek showed up on time, every day, without complaint. He rented a room in a boarding house, shared a bathroom with 4 other men, ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches.
He didn't recognize himself in the mirror anymore. The sharp jawline was hidden under a scraggly beard. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by thrift store finds. The confident smile had vanished entirely. But somewhere, deep inside, something was changing. The anger was fading. The blame was shifting. The walls he had built around his heart were starting to crack. One night, after a 12-hour shift, Derek sat in his cramped room and wrote a letter. Margaret, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need to say it anyway. I was wrong. About everything. I thought I was self-made. I thought I was special. I thought the world owed me something because I was smart and ambitious and worked hard. But the truth is, I was nothing without you. You saw something in me that wasn't even real. You believed in a version of me that I never bothered to become. I don't know why you stayed as long as you did. I don't know why you kept hoping I would change. But I know that every day you spent waiting for me to be better was a day I stole from you. I can't give those days back. I can't undo what I did. But I can try to be the man you thought you married, even if it's too late for us. I'm sorry, Margaret, for all of it. Derek. He stared at the letter for a long time. Then he folded it carefully, put it in an envelope, and placed it in his drawer. He didn't have her address, didn't know where to send it. Maybe that was for the best. Some apologies weren't about being heard. They were about finally being honest with yourself. Derek turned off the light and lay down on his narrow bed. Tomorrow, there would be more boxes to lift, more hours to work, more days to survive. But for the first time in his life, Derek Callahan fell asleep without the weight of his own ego crushing him. And in the darkness, something that might have been hope began to grow. 3 months turned into 6. 6 months turned into a year. Derek stopped counting the days. He stopped checking the news for stories about Margaret. He stopped hoping someone would recognize him and offer him his old life back. He just worked. The warehouse became his world. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, loading boxes, unloading trucks, stacking pallets until his muscles screamed and his mind went blissfully blank. His supervisor, a gruff man named Earl, who had been doing this job for 30 years, noticed the change in him. "You're different from when you started," Earl said one night, sharing a cigarette break outside the loading dock. "Less angry." "I was angry?" "Son, you had so much rage coming off you those first few weeks, I thought you were going to put your fist through a wall." Earl took a long drag. "What happened to you anyway, before this?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "I used to run a company." "What kind of company?" "Shipping, logistics. We moved cargo up and down the eastern seaboard." Earl laughed. "And now you're moving boxes in a warehouse in Worcester? Life's got a hell of a sense of humor." "Yeah," Derek stared at the night sky. "It does." "So what happened? Company go under?" "Something like that." Derek crushed his cigarette under his boot. "I made some bad decisions, hurt some people who didn't deserve it, lost everything." "Everything?" "My company, my home, my wife." Derek paused. "Myself, mostly." Earl nodded slowly. "And now? Now I'm trying to figure out who I am without all that stuff. Turns out, I don't really know. That's the hardest work there is, Earl said. Harder than any box you'll ever lift. But it's the only work that matters. He clapped Derek on the shoulder and walked back inside. Derek stood there for a long moment, thinking about what Earl had said. Who was he without the money, without the power, without the title? He was starting to find out. Margaret gave birth on a Tuesday in April. The delivery was smooth. The baby was healthy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with dark hair and blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. She named him James William Ashworth. James for no particular reason other than she liked the sound of it. William for her father, who had cried when he held his grandson for the first time. "He's perfect," William whispered, cradling the tiny bundle in his arms. "Absolutely perfect." "He has his father's eyes," Margaret said quietly. William looked up sharply. "He has your mother's eyes, Eleanor's eyes. Don't you dare give that man credit for anything." Margaret smiled weakly. She was exhausted, wrung out, but happier than she had been in years. "I'm not giving him credit, Papa. I'm just acknowledging reality." Reality is that this child will never know Derek Callahan's name. Reality is that he will be raised an Ashworth, with all the privilege and responsibility that entails. Reality is that his father abandoned him before he was even born. Derek didn't know I was pregnant. And whose fault is that? William's voice was gentle but firm. You tried to tell him, Margaret. He chose his mistress over you. He chose his pride over his family. The consequences of that choice are his to bear, not yours. Margaret closed her eyes. She was too tired to argue, too tired to think about Derek and what he might have done if he'd known. It didn't matter anymore. She had James. She had her father. She had a home and a family and a future that didn't include a man who had called her worthless. That was enough. It had to be enough. 2 years passed. Derek was promoted to shift supervisor at the warehouse. It wasn't much, $14 an hour instead of $11, but it meant something. It meant someone had noticed his work. Someone had seen value in him. He moved out of the boarding house and into a small apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was really just a corner with a hot plate. But it was his. He paid for it himself. No one could take it away. He started going to church on Sundays. Not because he was religious, but because he needed somewhere to sit and think. The quiet helped. The ritual helped. The idea that forgiveness was possible, even for people who didn't deserve it, helped. He wrote letters to Margaret every month. Never sent them. Just wrote them and put them in a drawer. It became a kind of therapy, a way of processing everything he had done and everything he had lost. Dear Margaret, I saw a woman today who reminded me of you. Same way of tilting her head when she listens. Same quiet strength in her eyes. I wanted to tell her she was beautiful. I wanted to tell her that whoever she was with was the luckiest person in the world. But I didn't, because I'm not that man anymore. The man who thinks he can have whatever he wants just by wanting it. I'm learning to want less. To appreciate what I have instead of always reaching for more. I hope you're happy, Margaret. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you found the peace I never gave you. Derek. He folded the letter and put it with the others. 47 letters now. 1 for every dollar he'd had in his wallet the day his world ended. Somehow, that felt right. Victoria's reality show premiered in the fall of Derek's 2nd year in Worcester. He didn't watch it. Didn't even know about it until one of his coworkers mentioned it. Hey Derek, isn't that your ex? Derek looked up from his lunch. Tony, a younger guy who worked the night shift, was scrolling through his phone. What are you talking about?
This show on Bravo, The Mistress's Revenge, about some chick who was dating a billionaire, but then his wife turned out to be richer. They're saying you're the billionaire." Derek's stomach dropped. "Let me see that." Tony handed over the phone.
The article showed Victoria in a designer dress, smiling for cameras at some premiere event. The headline read, "Victoria Lane opens up about her affair with disgraced CEO Derek Callahan." Derek scrolled through the article. His hands were shaking. "He was a monster," Lane claims in the explosive first episode. "He manipulated me, gaslit me, made me believe his wife was crazy. I was a victim just as much as Margaret was." Lane, 34, has parlayed her notoriety into a successful media career, including a best-selling memoir, The Other Woman, My Life in the Shadow of a Narcissist, and a lucrative endorsement deal with a major cosmetics company. "I've turned my trauma into triumph," Lane says. "Derek Callahan may have destroyed my reputation temporarily, but I've rebuilt myself into something stronger, something he could never be." Derek handed the phone back. "You okay, man?" Tony asked. "You look like you're gonna puke." "I'm fine." Derek stood up, throwing away his half-eaten sandwich. "I just need some air." He walked outside and sat on the loading dock, staring at nothing. Victoria was rich now, famous. She had turned his destruction into her career, just like the doorman had said she would. And the worst part? He couldn't even be angry about it. She was right. He had manipulated her. He had gaslit her. He had used her as a weapon against his own wife. Everything she said about him was true. Derek put his head in his hands and laughed. A broken, hollow sound. "The universe has a sense of humor," he muttered to himself. A really twisted sense of humor. Margaret watched the premiere of Victoria's show alone in her study. James was asleep upstairs, watched over by a nanny who had been vetted by 3 different security agencies. William was in Europe, negotiating some deal that would make the family another few $1 billion. Margaret had the house to herself. She poured a glass of wine and turned on the television. Victoria looked good, polished, professional. Nothing like the desperate woman who had shown up at the gala in that vulgar red dress. "He told me Margaret was crazy," Victoria said to the interviewer, dabbing at manufactured tears. "He said she was obsessed with him, that she refused to let go. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was admitting I was helping destroy an innocent woman's life." Margaret took a sip of wine. The night of the gala, when William Ashworth walked through those doors, I knew everything Derek had told me was a lie. Margaret wasn't crazy. She wasn't obsessed. She was a princess who had given up everything for a man who wasn't worth her time. The interviewer leaned forward. "Do you feel guilty about your role in what happened?" Victoria paused. A perfect, calculated pause. "Every day," she said softly. "I think about Margaret every single day." I wish I could apologize to her directly, but I know she would never accept it. And honestly, I don't blame her. Margaret turned off the television. She sat in the darkness for a long moment, processing what she had just watched. Victoria was lying, of course. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't think about Margaret every day. She was performing remorse because it made her more sympathetic, more relatable, more marketable. But there was something else in Victoria's eyes. Something Margaret hadn't expected to see. Fear. Victoria was afraid. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid of being irrelevant. Afraid that without the scandal, without the drama, without the connection to Derek and Margaret, she was nothing. Just like Derek had been nothing without Margaret's money. Just like Margaret had felt like nothing when Derek was tearing her down. They were all nothing, really. Just people stumbling through life,
trying to convince themselves they mattered.
The difference was what you did with that knowledge. Victoria used it to build a brand. Derek used it to destroy everyone around him. Margaret was still figuring out what she wanted to do with it, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never let her son feel like nothing. She would never let him doubt his worth. She would raise him to be kind and strong and humble, everything his father had failed to be. That was her purpose now. That was her mission. Everything else was just noise. Derek's third year in Worcester started with a phone call. He had saved enough to buy a cheap, prepaid phone. Nothing fancy, just something for emergencies. He gave the number to Earl and a few coworkers, but otherwise kept it private. So when it rang on a Tuesday morning, he was surprised. "Hello? Derek Callahan?" A woman's voice, professional, cold. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. I'm working on a story about the aftermath of the Ashworth-Callahan scandal, and I was hoping to get your perspective." Derek almost hung up. "I'm not interested in being interviewed." "I understand, but this isn't the hit piece, Mr. Callahan. I'm trying to tell a balanced story. 3 years later, where are all the players? What happened to them? How have their lives changed?" "My life is none of your business." "Fair enough, but here's the thing." Sarah's voice softened. "I've spoken to your former employees, your former board members, your former mistress who's now a reality TV star. Everyone has an opinion about Derek Callahan, but no one has actually talked to you in 3 years. Don't you think your side of the story deserves to be heard?" Derek was quiet for a long moment. "My side of the story is that I was a terrible person who got exactly what I deserved," he said finally. "That's not a story. That's just karma." "That's actually the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 6 months of research." Sarah paused. "Will you at least meet with me? Off the record? I promise, if you don't like what I'm planning to write, I won't use anything you say." Derek thought about it. 3 years ago, he would have hung up immediately. 3 years ago, he would have called his lawyers and threatened to sue. 3 years ago, he would have done anything to protect his image. But he didn't have an image anymore. He didn't have lawyers. He didn't have anything to protect. "Fine," he said. "There's a diner on Main Street in Worcester. Rosie's. I'll meet you there tomorrow at noon." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan. I appreciate it." "Don't thank me yet. You might not like what I have to say." He hung up before she could respond. Sarah Chen was younger than Derek expected. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. She had sharp eyes and a notebook that she kept closed on the table between them. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You said this was off the record." "It is. I just want to understand what happened. Not the public version. The real version." Derek stirred his coffee. "The real version is that I was an arrogant, selfish man who thought he was better than everyone around him. I treated my wife like garbage because I could. I cheated on her because I wanted to. I called her worthless because some part of me was terrified that I was the worthless one." Sarah's pen didn't move. She just listened. "When Margaret's father walked through those doors, when I realized who she really was, my first thought wasn't shame. It wasn't regret. It was calculation. I thought, how can I spin this? How can I use this to my advantage? Even in that moment, I was trying to figure out how to profit from her. And now? Now I understand that I was the problem. Not Margaret, not Victoria, not the board or the media or anyone else I tried to blame. Me. I destroyed everything I touched because I didn't know how to love anything without trying to own it." Sarah finally opened her notebook. "Do you think you've changed?" Derek laughed bitterly. I don't know. I'd like to think so. I work in a warehouse now. I make $14 an hour. I live in a one-bedroom apartment that costs less than my old wine budget. And somehow, I'm happier than I was when I had everything.
Happier?
Not happy, just less miserable, less angry, less convinced that the world owes me something. He looked out the window. I used to think success was about accumulation. More money, more power, more status. But all that stuff just made me more afraid. Afraid of losing it. Afraid that people would find out I wasn't as smart as I pretended to be.
And what do you think success is now?
Derek was quiet for a long moment. I think success is being able to look at yourself in the mirror without flinching. I'm not there yet, but I'm closer than I was. Sarah studied him carefully.
Have you tried to contact Margaret?
No, she has a restraining order. And even if she didn't, Derek shook his head. She deserves peace. She deserves to live her life without me trying to insert myself into it. The best thing I can do for her is stay away.
You know she has a son now.
Derek's whole body went still. What? Sarah's eyes widened slightly.
You didn't know?
No. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know.
James William Ashworth, born about 2 years ago. He's been all over the society pages. The Ashworth heir.
Derek's hands were trembling. He gripped his coffee cup to steady them. How old? He managed.
He'll be 2 in April.
Derek did the math. 12 weeks pregnant at the gala, plus 9 months, plus 2 years. The timing was right. The baby was his. Margaret had been pregnant at the gala. She had been carrying his child when he called her worthless. When he demanded a divorce. When he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises.
Mr. Callahan, are you okay?
Derek couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The diner seemed to be spinning around him. He had a son. A son he had never seen. A son who would grow up never knowing his father's name. Because Derek had thrown him away before he was even born. I have to go, Derek said, standing abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor.
Mr. Callahan, wait.
I'm sorry. I can't do this. I can't. He stumbled out of the diner, gasping for air. A son. He had a son. And he had lost him before he even knew he existed. Derek walked for hours that night, through the streets of Worcester, past the warehouse where he worked, past the boarding house where he had spent his first desperate months, past the church where he sat every Sunday, pretending he knew how to pray. He thought about the sonogram, the one Margaret had tried to show him in the car before the gala, the one he had dismissed because he was too busy thinking about Victoria, too busy thinking about himself. She had tried to tell him, and he hadn't listened. How many other times had she tried to tell him things? How many times had he shut her down because he was too arrogant to hear? He found himself standing in front of a payphone, the same kind of payphone he had used to call his mother 3 years ago. The mother who had told him his father was ashamed to share his name. He fed quarters into the slot. His hand hovered over the keypad. He could call the Ashworth estate. He could demand to speak to Margaret. He could beg her to let him see his son, just once, just for a moment. But he knew how that conversation would end. She would say no. Her father would threaten him with lawyers. Security would be increased. His name would be added to more restricted lists. And James, his son, would grow up hearing stories about the terrible man who had hurt his mother. The monster who had called her worthless. The villain of her life story. Derek's hand fell away from the keypad. He couldn't do it. He couldn't force himself into that child's life, just to ease his own guilt. He couldn't make Margaret relive the worst moment of her life just because he wanted something he didn't deserve. Some sins couldn't be forgiven. Some damage couldn't be undone. The best thing he could do for his son was the same thing he could do for Margaret. Stay away. Let them be happy without him. Derek walked home in the rain, tears mixing with the water on his face. When he got back to his apartment, he sat down at his small desk and wrote another letter. Dear Margaret, I found out today that we have a son. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to process it. I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you'll throw it away like I deserve. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand why you didn't tell me. I understand why you're protecting him from me. I understand why you're right to keep me away. I would have been a terrible father, selfish, demanding, more concerned with what he could do for me than what I could do for him. Our son deserves better than that. He deserves everything I could never give him. So I'm going to stay away. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much to poison his life the way I poisoned yours. If there's any justice in the universe, he'll grow up to be everything I wasn't. Kind, humble, capable of love without conditions. Tell him... No, don't tell him anything. He doesn't need to know I exist. He has you. He has your father. He has everything he needs. I'm sorry, Margaret, for all of it. For every moment I made you feel small. For every time I chose someone else over you. For every chance I had to be better, and every time I chose to be worse. I love you. I know it's too late to say that. I know it doesn't mean anything now. But I needed you to know that somewhere, in whatever dark corner of my heart was still capable of feeling, I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. Goodbye, Margaret. Have a beautiful life. Derek. He folded the letter, put it in an envelope, wrote the address of the Ashworth estate on the front. Then he walked to the mailbox on the corner and dropped it in before he could change his mind. It was probably a mistake. She would probably throw it away without reading it. Her lawyers would probably use it as evidence of harassment. But for the first time in 3 years, Derek felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. He hadn't earned that. But maybe something close to acceptance. He had made his choices. Now he had to live with them. All he could do was try to be better, one day at a time, for the rest of his life. The letter arrived at the Ashworth estate on a gray Thursday morning. Margaret was in her study, reviewing quarterly reports for the foundation she had launched 2 years ago. The Ashworth Family Foundation for Domestic Abuse Survivors had helped over 10,000 women escape dangerous situations. It was her legacy, her way of turning her pain into purpose. Her assistant knocked softly. Ms. Ashworth, this came in the mail. Security already screened it. It's from... She hesitated. It's from Derek Callahan. Margaret's pen stopped moving. Leave it on the desk. Should I? Just leave it. Thank you. The assistant placed the envelope on the corner of the desk and retreated quickly. Margaret stared at it for a long time. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of rebuilding her life without him. And now this. A letter. As if words on paper could erase what he had done. She should throw it away. She should burn it without reading it. That's what her father would tell her to do. That's what her lawyers would advise. But something made her reach for it. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The handwriting was different from what she remembered. Shakier, less confident. As if the hand that wrote it had forgotten how to be arrogant. She read the letter once, then again,
Then a third time. I found out today that we have a son. Her heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, after 3 years, he knew about James. She kept reading. I'm going to stay away. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much to poison his life the way I poisoned yours. Margaret set the letter down. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were wet. Something in her chest that had been locked away for 3 years was trying to break free. She had expected anger. She had expected demands. She had expected threats of lawyers and custody battles, and all the ugly things men like Derek did when they wanted something. Instead, she got this: an apology, a confession, a goodbye. I love you.
I know it's too late to say that. Margaret closed her eyes. Did she believe him? Could she believe him? After everything he had done, after every cruel word and dismissive gesture and heartless betrayal, could she trust that this letter was real? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. This wasn't the same man who had called her worthless at the gala. This wasn't the man who had grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. This wasn't the man who had chosen his mistress over his wife without a second thought. This was someone else, someone broken, someone trying to put the pieces back together. Margaret folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't know what to do with it, not yet, but she couldn't throw it away. 2 more years passed. Derek celebrated his 5th anniversary at the warehouse with a small cake in the break room. Earl made a speech about hard work and second chances. His co-workers clapped and made jokes about how he was getting too old for the heavy lifting. He was 42 now. His hair was graying at the temples. His hands were calloused from years of honest labor. He looked nothing like the man who had once graced the covers of business magazines. And somehow, he was content. Not happy exactly. Happiness felt like too much to ask for. But content, at peace, able to look at himself in the mirror without flinching, just like he had told Sarah Chen. He still wrote letters to Margaret, once a month, like clockwork. He never sent them after that first one, just wrote them and put them in a drawer. It was his way of processing, his way of staying connected to a life he had lost. He never tried to contact James, never searched for photos online, never drove past the Ashworth estate to catch a glimpse of the son he would never know. He had made a promise, to himself, to Margaret, to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. He would stay away. It was the only gift he could give them. One night, after a double shift, Derek came home to find an envelope slipped under his door. No return address, just his name, written in elegant handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, with dark hair and blue eyes, sitting on a swing in what looked like a massive garden. He was laughing, his head thrown back, pure joy radiating from his face. On the back of the photo, in the same elegant handwriting, "His name is James. He has your laugh." Derek sat down heavily on his bed. He stared at the photograph until his vision blurred with tears. His son. His beautiful, perfect son. He had his laugh. Derek pressed the photograph to his chest and wept. Margaret watched from her car as Derek walked into the warehouse. She'd hired a private investigator 3 months ago. Not to spy on him exactly, just to understand who he had become, whether the letter had been real or just another manipulation. The reports had surprised her. Derek Callahan, former CEO, now worked as a shift supervisor at a logistics warehouse in Worcester. He made $16 an hour. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. He went to church on Sundays and volunteered at a homeless shelter on Saturdays. He had never contacted James,
never tried to find out where they lived, never made any move to insert himself into their lives. He had kept his promise. Margaret didn't know what to feel about that. Part of her had wanted him to fight. Part of her had wanted him to show up at the estate gates, demanding to see his son, giving her a reason to hate him forever. Instead, he had done the one thing she never expected. He had respected her wishes. She had sent the photograph on impulse, a moment of weakness, or maybe a moment of grace. She had agonized over it for days afterward, wondering if she had made a mistake.
But something in her needed him to see James, needed him to know that despite everything, something beautiful had come from their broken marriage. Now, watching him walk into that warehouse in his gray uniform, she wondered if she had done the right thing. Her phone buzzed. Her father. "Margaret, where are you? The foundation board meeting starts in an hour." "I know, Papa. I'll be there." "Is everything all right? You sound distracted." Margaret looked at the warehouse one more time. "Everything's fine. I just had something to take care of." She started the car and drove away. James was 5 when he first asked about his father. Margaret had been dreading this moment since the day he was born. She had prepared speeches, rehearsed explanations, practiced responses that were honest but gentle. None of it prepared her for the reality. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" They were sitting in the library, James curled up in her lap with a picture book. He had been looking at a page showing a family: mother, father, 2 children, a dog. Margaret's heart clenched. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Tommy at school has a daddy, and Sarah has a daddy, and Michael has 2 daddies." James looked up at her with those piercing blue eyes. Derek's eyes. "But I don't have any daddy. Why?" Margaret took a breath. "You do have a daddy, James. Everyone has a daddy. It takes a mommy and a daddy to make a baby." "Then where is he?" He lives far away." "Why doesn't he live with us?" "Because sometimes mommies and daddies can't live together. Sometimes they make each other sad instead of happy. And when that happens, it's better for everyone if they live apart." James processed this with the solemnity of a 5-year-old philosopher. "Did I make him sad? Is that why he went away?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She pulled James closer, holding him tight. "No, baby, no. You didn't do anything wrong. Your daddy left before he even knew about you. It wasn't your fault. It was never your fault." "Does he know about me now?" Margaret hesitated. "Yes, he knows about you now." "Does he love me?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Margaret thought about the letter in her desk drawer, the one she had read 100 times over the past 2 years. The one that said, "Our son deserves everything I could never give him." "I think he does, sweetheart, in his own way. I think he loves you very much." "Then why doesn't he come see me?" Because sometimes loving someone means staying away. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them be happy without you. James was quiet for a long moment. "That sounds sad," he finally said. "It is sad," Margaret agreed. "But it's also brave. It takes a lot of courage to put someone else's happiness before your own." James nodded slowly, as if he understood more than a 5-year-old should. "Mama?" "Yes, baby?" "Can I write him a letter? Like you write letters to the people the foundation helps?" Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "You want to write your daddy a letter?" "I want to tell him it's okay, that I'm not sad, that I have you and Grandpa and Nanny Rose and everyone." James looked up at her earnestly. "I don't want him to feel bad, Mama, even if he can't come see me." Margaret stared at her son. 5 years old, and he had more compassion than most adults she knew.
more capacity for forgiveness than she had ever possessed. "Okay," she whispered. "We can write him a letter." The letter arrived at Derek's apartment on a Saturday. He recognized the handwriting immediately. The same elegant script that had accompanied James's photograph 2 years ago. But this envelope was thicker, heavier. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in a child's careful printing.
Letters that were too big and words that were spelled phonetically. A 5-year-old's first attempt at communication. "Dear Daddy, my name is James. I am 5. Mama says you live far away. I have a dog named Biscuit. He is brown. I like trains and dinosaurs. My favorite color is blue. Mama says you love me. I love you too, even though I don't remember you. That's okay. Mama says sometimes people who love each other can't be together. I understand. I hope you're not sad. I am happy. Mama takes care of me good. Love, James. P.S. Grandpa says you're a good man who made mistakes. I make mistakes too sometimes. It's okay." Derek read the letter 3 times. Then he put his head in his hands and sobbed. His son had written to him. His beautiful, kind, forgiving son had reached out across 5 years of silence to tell him it was okay. It was more than he deserved. More than he had ever dared to hope for. He pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. "Dear James, thank you for your letter. It's the best thing anyone has ever given me. I have a lot of things I want to tell you, but I don't know if I have the right words. I'm not very good with words. I used to think I was, but I was wrong about a lot of things. You asked if I'm sad. Sometimes I am. But your letter made me happy. The happiest I've been in a very long time. I like trains too. When I was your age, I had a model train set that went around my whole bedroom. I spent hours watching it go round and round. There's something peaceful about trains. They always know where they're going. Your mom is the best person I've ever known. She's smart and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. You're lucky to have her. She'll teach you how to be good in ways I never could. I made a lot of mistakes, James. Big ones. I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I was selfish and mean, and I thought I was better than everyone else. But I'm trying to be different now. I'm trying to be the kind of person who deserves to be your father. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I want you to know I'm trying. I love you, James, more than you'll ever know. Your Daddy." He sealed the letter and addressed it to the Ashworth estate. Then he walked to the mailbox and dropped it in. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something like hope. The letters continued. Once a month, like clockwork. James would write about school, about Biscuit, about the things he was learning and the friends he was making. Derek would write back, sharing small details about his life, asking questions, offering advice when James asked for it. They never spoke on the phone, never video chatted, never met in person, but somehow, through ink and paper, they built something real. Margaret monitored the correspondence at first, read every letter before James did, censored anything that might confuse or hurt him. But as the months passed, she found herself reading less and worrying more. Derek's letters were gentle, patient, full of the kind of wisdom that only comes from failure. He never blamed Margaret, never complained about his circumstances, never tried to turn James against her or make himself out to be a victim. He just showed up, month after month, letter after letter, the way he should have shown up during their marriage. Margaret didn't know what to make of it. Part of her was grateful. James deserved a father who cared, even if that father could only exist on paper. Part of her was angry.
Where was this Derek 5 years ago? 10 years ago? Why did he have to become a good man only after he had destroyed everything? And part of her, a part she tried to ignore, wondered if she had been wrong about him. Not about what he did. That was unforgivable. The cruelty, the betrayal, the public humiliation. But maybe she had been wrong about who he was underneath.
Maybe the man who wrote these letters had always been there, buried beneath the arrogance and the fear. Maybe she had given up too soon, or maybe she had given up at exactly the right time. Margaret didn't know, but she knew she couldn't ignore the letters anymore. Derek collapsed at work on a Tuesday afternoon. One moment he was lifting a box. The next he was on the floor, clutching his chest, unable to breathe. The ambulance came. The paramedics worked on him in the back of the vehicle, barking instructions and attaching wires and pumping something into his veins. Heart attack. Massive. The kind that kills half the people it hits. Derek survived. Barely. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later, surrounded by machines and tubes and the steady beep of monitors. Earl was sitting in the chair beside his bed. "Welcome back," Earl said gruffly. "Thought we lost you for a minute there." "What happened?" "Your heart gave out. Too many years of stress," the doctor said. Plus the physical labor. Plus, I'm guessing, about a decade of not taking care of yourself. Derek tried to laugh, but it came out as a wheeze. "How bad?" "Bad. They did surgery, put in some stents. You're going to be on medication for the rest of your life." Earl leaned forward. "You scared the hell out of us, Derek. The whole warehouse was praying for you." "Praying for me?" "You've got friends, whether you know it or not. People who care about you. People who would miss you if you were gone." Derek stared at the ceiling. Friends. He had friends. People who would miss him. It seemed impossible. The man who had once alienated everyone around him now had people who cared whether he lived or died. "There's something else," Earl said quietly. "Someone's been calling the hospital, asking about your condition. Wouldn't leave a name, but the nurse said it was a woman. Sounded like she'd been crying." Derek's heart monitor spiked. "Margaret?" "I don't know, but whoever she is, she's called 6 times in 3 days." Derek closed his eyes. Margaret was checking on him. After everything he had done, after everything he had put her through, she was worried about whether he lived or died. He didn't deserve it. But maybe that was the point. Grace never goes to the people who deserve it. It goes to the people who need it. The doctor said he needed rest. Lots of rest. No more warehouse work. No more physical labor. His heart was too weak. Derek didn't know what he would do. He had no savings, no insurance beyond the basic coverage from the warehouse. No family to fall back on. But he wasn't scared. He had faced worse than this. He had survived worse than this. And somewhere out there, a little boy was writing him letters. A little boy who loved him despite everything. That was worth living for. Margaret found out about Derek's heart attack from the private investigator she had never stopped paying. She didn't know why she kept tabs on him. Didn't know why she cared what happened to a man who had caused her so much pain. But when she heard he was in the hospital, when she heard he had almost died, something inside her shattered. She called the hospital 6 times before she finally admitted to herself what she was doing. She called her father. "I need to tell you something, Papa." William looked up from his newspaper. He was 73 now, silver-haired and slightly stooped, but still sharp as ever. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I've been corresponding with Derek, through James. He writes letters and James writes back and—" She took a breath. "Derek had a heart attack 3 days ago. He almost died." William was quiet for a long moment. "And how do you feel about that?" I don't know. Margaret sat down heavily. I should feel nothing. Or maybe I should feel vindicated. Karma finally catching up to him. But I don't. I feel sad, scared even, and I don't know what that means. William set down his newspaper. It means you're human, Margaret. It means that despite everything he did, some part of you still cares about him. I shouldn't care. After what he did? What he did was unforgivable. That doesn't mean you can't still have feelings about it. William leaned forward. The heart doesn't follow rules, sweetheart. It loves who it loves, even when they don't deserve it. I don't love him anymore. Maybe not, but you loved who he could have been, who you thought he was. And now you're watching that person finally emerge, right when it might be too late. Margaret wiped her eyes. What should I do, Papa? William was quiet for a long moment. I've spent 5 years hating that man, plotting his destruction, making sure he paid for every tear you shed. He sighed heavily. But watching James read those letters, watching my grandson develop a relationship with his father, it's changed something in me. Changed what? Made me realize that revenge doesn't heal anything. It just spreads the poison around. William reached out and took his daughter's hand. If you want to see him, Margaret, I won't stop you. If you want to bring James to meet his father, I'll support that. And if I don't, then that's your choice too. Whatever you decide, I'm behind you. Margaret squeezed her father's hand. She didn't know what she wanted, didn't know what was right, but she knew she had to make a decision, and she had to make it soon. Derek was released from the hospital 2 weeks later. He went back to his apartment, weaker than before, with a bag full of medications and a list of restrictions that would change his life forever. No heavy lifting, no strenuous exercise, no stress. The warehouse job was over. He didn't know what he would do, how he would pay rent, how he would survive. But when he opened his apartment door, he found an envelope slipped under it. He recognized the elegant handwriting immediately. Inside was a check for $250,000 and a note. Derek, this is not forgiveness. I don't know if I'm capable of that yet. But James needs his father, and I need him to have one. Use this money to take care of yourself. Get healthy. Write your letters. Be there for our son, even if you can't be there in person. Maybe someday things will be different. Maybe someday we'll be ready for more. But for now, this is what I can give. Margaret. P.S. James drew you a picture. He wanted you to have it. Derek unfolded the drawing. It showed 3 figures, a small boy in the middle, a woman on one side, a man on the other. At the bottom, in James's careful printing, my family. Derek held the drawing to his chest and wept. 2 years later, Derek got a phone call. He had moved to a small cottage in Vermont. The money Margaret sent had covered the down payment and given him enough to live on while he recovered. He spent his days gardening, writing, and waiting for James's letters. The phone rang on a Sunday afternoon. Hello? Derek? A woman's voice. Familiar. Impossibly familiar. Margaret? Yes. A pause. James wants to meet you. In person. Derek's heart, weakened but still beating, nearly stopped. When? Next Saturday. There's a park halfway between Greenwich and your cottage. The one with a covered bridge. I know it. He's nervous. I'm nervous. But he's been asking for months, and I can't keep saying no. Margaret, Derek's voice broke. Thank you. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. Her voice was steady.
But James does. He deserves to know his father. And you've shown me, through years of letters and patience and respect, that maybe you can be the father he needs. I'll try. I'll try so hard. I know you will. Another pause.
Derek,
Yes?
don't mess this up.
The line went dead. Derek sat in his kitchen, staring at the phone, his hands trembling. He was going to meet his son. After 7 years, he was finally going to meet James. The park was beautiful in autumn. Derek arrived early. He wore his best clothes, which weren't much, but they were clean and pressed. He had shaved for the first time in weeks. He looked like himself again, or at least a version of himself he could live with. He saw them approaching from across the covered bridge. Margaret looked older, but still beautiful, still strong, still the woman he had loved and lost and destroyed. And beside her, holding her hand, was a boy, 7 years old now, tall for his age, dark hair, blue eyes. Derek's eyes. James saw him first. His face broke into a smile. "Daddy!" He broke away from Margaret and ran across the bridge.
Derek dropped to his knees just as James crashed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck, holding tight like he would never let go.
"Daddy, you're real! You're actually real!" Derek held his son. Held him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. Held him like he would never get another chance. "I'm real, buddy. I'm right here." Margaret approached slowly. She stopped a few feet away, watching them with something unreadable in her eyes. "Thank you," Derek said, looking up at her over James's shoulder. "Thank you for this. For everything." Margaret nodded slowly. "He's your son too, Derek. I was wrong to keep you apart for so long." "No, you were right to protect him. I wasn't ready. I had to become someone worth knowing first." "And are you? Worth knowing?" Derek looked at his son, at this beautiful, perfect boy who had somehow found room in his heart for a father who didn't deserve it. "I'm trying to be. Every day. For the rest of my life." James pulled back, looking at his father with those serious blue eyes. "Daddy?" "Yes, buddy?" "Are you going to stay this time?" Derek felt tears streaming down his face. "I can't live with you, James. Your mom and I, we can't be together like that. But I will never, ever leave you again. I will be here whenever you need me, whenever you want to talk, whenever you just want to know your dad is thinking about you." "Promise?" "Promise." James nodded solemnly. "Okay, I believe you." He took Derek's hand in one of his own. Then he reached out and took Margaret's hand with the other. "Can we go get ice cream now?" Derek laughed through his tears. "Yeah, buddy, we can get ice cream." The three of them walked across the covered bridge together. Not a family in the traditional sense. Not healed, not whole. But connected. Finally connected. And sometimes, that's enough. Derek died on a quiet Tuesday morning, 6 years later. His heart had never fully recovered. The doctors had warned him. But he had made the most of every day he had left. He watched James grow into a teenager, attended his baseball games and piano recitals, wrote him letters on his birthday every year, telling him how proud he was. He never remarried, never dated, never tried to rebuild what he had lost with Margaret. But they became friends, real friends, the kind who could sit in comfortable silence and remember both the good and the bad without flinching. On the morning he died, Derek wrote one final letter. "Dear James, if you're reading this, my heart finally gave out. Don't be sad. I had more time than I deserved, and I spent every minute of it grateful for you. I want you to know something, son, something I learned the hard way. True power isn't about what you own. It's about who you protect. It's about who you love. It's about having the courage to be kind when cruelty would be easier. Your mother taught me that. You taught me that. I wasted the first half of my life chasing things that didn't matter. Money, status, the approval of people who never really cared about me. Don't make my mistakes, James. Love deeply, forgive freely, and never, ever call anyone worthless. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you can't see. Every person you meet has a story that would break your heart if you knew it. Treat them with compassion, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. That's what grace is, son. Giving people what they need instead of what they've earned. I love you, James. I always did, even when I didn't know how to show it. Take care of your mother. She's the best person I've ever known. And take care of yourself. Your father, Derek. P.S. My watch is in the drawer beside my bed. The one I bought back from the pawn shop, dollar by dollar, over 5 years. It's not worth much anymore, but it reminds me that time is the one thing you can't buy. Wear it. Remember me.
And make better use of your time than I made of mine. Margaret found the letter when she went to clear out Derek's cottage. She read it standing in his small kitchen, surrounded by years of correspondence, photographs of James at every age, and a drawer full of unsent letters addressed to her. She opened one at random. Dear Margaret, James sent me a photo today. He looks so much like you when he smiles. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you, just because it needs to be said. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I spent 7 years trying to convince myself I deserved you. I didn't. I don't. But I'm grateful for every moment, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. They made me who I am. Derek. Margaret put the letter down. She looked at the stack of correspondence. Hundreds of letters. A decade of thoughts and apologies and love. Never sent. Never demanding anything in return. Mama? James stood in the doorway. 17 now. Tall and handsome and kind. Everything his father had hoped he would be. Did you find it? The watch? Margaret nodded. She held up the Patek Philippe, worn and scratched, but still keeping perfect time. James took it carefully. He really kept this all these years? He bought it back from a pawn shop, spent 5 years paying it off. James fastened it around his wrist. It fit perfectly. He talked about it in his last letter, said it reminded him that time is the one thing you can't buy. He was right about that. James looked at his mother. Do you think he was happy at the end? Margaret thought about the letters, the photographs, the quiet cottage filled with evidence of a life transformed. I think he found peace, she said finally, which is more than most people get. James nodded slowly. I'm glad I knew him, even if it wasn't perfect, even if we couldn't be a normal family. So am I, sweetheart. James hugged his mother tightly. He said something in his last letter about true power. What did he say? That it's not about what you own. It's about who you protect. Margaret smiled through her tears. He learned that from you, you know, watching you grow up, seeing the kind of person you were becoming. I learned it from both of you. James pulled back, looking at her with Derek's blue eyes and Margaret's gentle smile. From him, I learned what happens when you forget. From you, I learned what happens when you remember. Margaret touched her son's face. Then his life wasn't wasted after all. No, James agreed. It wasn't. They walked out of the cottage together, into the autumn sunlight. Behind them, Derek's final letter lay open on the table, its words carrying forward into a future he would never see, but had helped create.
True power isn't about what you own. It's about who you protect. And in the end, that was his legacy.
Not the company he had built and lost. Not the money he had earned and squandered. Not the reputation he had destroyed and never quite rebuilt. Just a son who loved him, a woman who forgave him, and a truth that outlived them all. That real strength isn't measured by what you take. It's measured by what you give.